Top of the morning to you. Welcome to our special coverage of the Russian invasion of Ukraine. I'm Olumide Macaulay. The headlines: at least one civilian injured after Russia's strike on Odessa port. Ukraine says the port sustained significant damage. Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky says Ukraine and the United States will jointly produce weapons. Plus, Russia's Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov says the European Union shall buy the Ukrainian grain that the bloc says it doesn't need and ship it to Africa. Thank you for joining us. A Russian attack hit port infrastructure in Ukraine's southern Odessa region overnight, sparking a fire and injuring at least one civilian. Ukrainian military officials say the southern port of Odessa sustained significant damage, latest attack on Ukraine's grain export infrastructure. In a Telegram post, Ole Kipper, head of the Odessa Regional Military Administration, said a woman suffered shrapnel injuries following the attack, which included drones and two types of missiles. He added that a fire broke out in a non-residential high-rise in Odessa and was quickly extinguished, indicating that there was also damage to a warehouse and a private house in the Odessa area. Russia has repeatedly attacked Odessa in recent months, targeting Ukrainian grain infrastructure following the collapse of the Black Sea grain deal. Meanwhile, the Russian and Ukrainian military forces continue to exchange fire, striking each other's targets as the war rages on. The Russian Defense Ministry issued a war report saying the Russian army in the past week used high-precision weapons to attack targets of the Ukraine army, such as maintenance facilities, arsenal which stored weapons, and ammunition provided by the Western countries' deployment points of foreign mercenaries. In addition, the Russian air defense system intercepted the Ukrainian army's HIMARS rockets, cruise missiles, anti-ship missiles, drones, and other targets. On the other hand, the General Staff of the Ukrainian Armed Forces issued its report, saying over the past 24 hours, the Ukrainian army continued to fight with the Russian army in the directions of Marinka, Melitopol, and Bakhmut, launched airstrikes on Russian military personnel and equipment posts, and hit Russian air defense missile systems, radars, and other targets with missiles. Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky says the United States had agreed to jointly produce weapons with Ukraine in a move he called an absolute fantasy until recently. Speaking in his usual nightly address, Mr. Zelensky added the pact included air defense systems crucial for Ukraine to defend itself from Russia's air attacks. He also commended Ukrainian forces for success in some areas of a 3-month-old counteroffensive, but gave no indication on any new movement forward. His comments come as Russian forces shelled southern Ukraine's Kherson region on Sunday, killing 2 people and injuring at least 8 others, as well as causing considerable damage to buildings. Meanwhile, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky offered a heartfelt thanks to Canada for its help in the war against Russia, saying Ottawa's aid had helped save thousands of lives. Since the beginning of 2022, Canada has committed over $8 billion in aid to Ukraine, including over $1.8 billion in military assistance. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau said Canada will be offering an extra $650 million in military aid over 3 years to supply Ukraine with 50 armored vehicles.
At each meeting, Canada was clear, as we always are, that we will stand with Ukraine with whatever it takes for as long as it takes. And today, we're backing up this commitment with further support. We are shifting our approach to provide multi-year assistance, ensuring Ukraine has the predictable support it needs for long-term success. As part of this approach, I'm announcing $650 million in new military assistance over the next 3 years to supply Ukraine with 50 armored vehicles, including armored medical evacuation vehicles that will be built by Canadian workers in London, Ontario. First, Canada and Ukraine have agreed to engage with G7 partners to establish a working group of eminent persons who will provide advice on the seizure and forfeiture of Russian assets, including of the Russian Central Bank. Second, we're adding another 63 Russian individuals and entities to our sanctions list, including those complicit in the kidnapping of children and the spreading of disinformation.
Russia's Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov says the European Commission should buy Ukrainian agricultural produce that the bloc says it doesn't need and ship it to African countries. He was speaking at the United Nations General Assembly, where he added in his words, since the European Commission is wasting tens of billions of dollars on Ukraine, it can buy the grain that Ukraine wants to sell, and EU countries don't want to buy for reasons of competitiveness and send it to Africa. Western allies have repeatedly accused Moscow of trapping millions of tons of grain in Ukrainian Black Sea ports of exacerbating a global food crisis, particularly across the African continent. According to Russia's top diplomat, Ukrainian agricultural produce is being supplied to European countries in abundance, but many of them don't want to buy it because they have their own farmers and don't want them to bust due to competition.
Урегулировали между собой вопрос взаимного признания суверенитета двух стран, пришла пора для мирной жизни, для ее налаживания, укрепления доверия.
Now let's talk to Dr. Olena Sneger, expert at the Center for Global Studies Strategy in Ukraine, who joins us from Ukraine. Good morning. Thank you for joining us. And Доброго ранку.
Good morning. Доброго ранку.
Could we begin with this grain issue? It's been so thorny, and possibly with the issue concerning Poland. You know, it's very worrying for onlookers to find that Poland may have issues with Ukraine, and them saying they're no longer going to supply weapons to Ukraine immediately after Ukraine took them to the WTO for the reasons of their not keeping up the ban on, extending the ban on agricultural produce from Ukraine. To me, it was like, that's like cutting off your nose to spite your face, since Poland are such allies to Ukraine. What's your opinion?
Well, in Ukraine, there was a big, huge, actual discussion about that. And, well, I like the definition of this kind of neighbor quarrel between neighbors, that such argues or quarrel can happen only between very, very close neighbors, which are even more than neighbors, but some kind relatives or a family. Because Ukrainians and Polish people are really very strongly connected historically, and we know each other very well. And we can sometimes say what we don't like very openly, and do not control so much wording to each other as we do to other nations. So with the Poland, this conflict has been it's not so harsh anymore. The Prime Minister of Poland, he said, and the Minister of Trade of Poland, he said that the arguments of his Ukrainian counterpart satisfied him, and they are going to continue this dialogue about grain, about Ukrainian grain and agricultural trade between Ukraine and Poland, because actually Ukraine and Poland are not only neighbors, allies, and friends, but also competitors, and very big competitors in agricultural sphere. And we both countries compete for global market and also for European market. So for Ukraine, it was important to get its grain to external market. But as soon as this Ukrainian grain appeared in Poland, the big traders, they did with this grain what they actually thought it would be more profitable to them. So they didn't want to transport it further, but they preferred to sell it at the local market. And local consumers, they bought the grain. That didn't satisfy, of course, Polish farmers. So it's obviously understandable. But at this point, we all are now having a very strong dialogue and looking for a solution. About the weapon, it was very also, as I mentioned, the declarations were very harsh. But immediately after that declaration, the Polish Prime Minister, not Prime Minister, but President Andrzej Duda, he said that Poland is not going to send to Ukraine the new weapon that Polish is getting from its allies and is with which Poland rearming its army. And it's normal, like Poland did it before. So Poland gave to Ukraine and sent to Ukraine that weapon that Poland was getting rid of during the process of rearming.
Yeah.
And so it's normal, like nothing changed obviously, but we will see in future. But yeah, it was mainly this whole scandal was mainly about the harsh rhetoric and the great tension, because we all are obviously stressed, so we all are obviously very nervous, Ukrainians and Polish people, so we also can react more strongly than it's necessary. And then we feel sorry, but what has been done has been done. And then we are like, but right now, from what I see, officials of two countries, they are looking for the solution. And about the VTO process, so VTO, such organizations as VTO has been created for such to solve such kind of problems. So there is nothing special or nothing scandalous about that. We are members of this organization, and there is kind of procedures and rules. And okay, if Ukraine lose, then Ukraine lose. Then we will obey. If there were some violations from Polish side, then Poland should to look for some way out of the situation. So these are just normal work of international institutions and international rules.
But are they back on the same page now, Ukraine and Poland? Because you saw the reaction from the Russians, who said that it's inevitable that there will be conflict within the European community as long as this war continues. And it obviously did not help, because the Prime Minister, reacting to President Zelensky's address at the United Nations General Assembly, saying that Ukraine should not insult Poland. The Prime Minister of Poland saying that, referring to President Zelensky, in some of his insinuations, as you said, some of the rhetoric may be said under pressure and under extreme stress of this very stressful situation.
Obviously, Ukraine and Poland, as I said, we have maybe the closest neighbors.
Poland.
Ukraine with Poland are the closest neighbors among other European countries. And we have a very long and difficult history of relationship between Ukrainians and Polish people. And there were good pages in our history and bad pages in our history, and we really understand and know each other very good, like in a big family. So I can definitely say that if even we are not like to the last word at the same page, but I can definitely say that we are at the same page to find out the way of the situation, and the officials are really hard working on the solution of this problem, because there are willing of from both sides to find a way out and to continue and to strengthen partnership, because uh, even though we are competitors, as I said, we are very strong allies and have been also like we have been in the face of Russian threats in the past, and now we have the same enemy. We understand it very well. We had the same war actually in the past, and Ukrainians and Polish people were once allies in the war with Russia. So the history repeats itself, and we definitely understand that we do not unite. If we do not unite, then we will lose. First, Ukraine will lose, and then Polish people will have to fight in the same war with Russia. So we all understand it, and that's why I'm pretty sure, I'm just 100% sure that the solution will be found.
Dr. Sniger, 576 days, except I've missed my computation, 576 days and counting. A baby born at the start of this war will be like almost 2 years old. And it's amazing that this has continued to this degree, and one can only pray for an end to it. But on the heels of the United Nations General Assembly, the Chinese have said that the way they see forward is for a cessation of hostilities that brings both parties back to discussions for peace, excluding possibly any demands from Russia or Ukraine. Stop the war as it is, call for an armistice of some sort, and come back to start to talk. Why is it so hard for both parties to come back to start to talk and stop fighting for the moment, irrespective of the territory that Russia has taken? If they're told to stay the way they are, what's the argument against that or for that? What do you think?
Because, as I said, it's not the first war that we have with Russia, and it's not the first war that Russia conducts with its neighbors after the collapse of the Soviet Union. I will remind you just that Russia had a war with the Chechen Republic.
Yeah.
Russia actually had two wars. One war was pretty short, and that war Russia lost, and it even had signed the agreement with Chechnya, with independent Chechnya. Russia has recognized Chechnya, but after like very short period, Russia started a new war with Chechnya, and that war lasted for 10 years. And after that war, the result of that war, Chechen people were broken, and now what we have in Chechnya is a dictatorship with Ramzan Kadyrov. So Russia can conduct long wars, and we all know the result of that war. There is nothing left. There is no place for compromise, actually, because Russia never recognizes compromise. And that's what we know, because we lost one war, our war with Russia. At the beginning of the 20th century, we lost. And after that, we had genocide by famine, where more than 3 million, up to 4 million people died due to famine, artificial famine, created by Soviet government on the territory of Ukraine. So we remember that. We remember what happened, that we lost our people in Siberia camps, concentration camps, and that our intelligentsia has been all eliminated by Russians also in different camps and also on the territory of Ukraine. So we remember, we have it in collective memory, and we understand that this will repeat if we do not resist. Because if we now agree for a kind of compromise with Russia without trying to win, then Russia will just get some time to rearm and to reorganize, and then Russia will attack again. And then I'm not sure that Ukrainians are not sure that we can sustain the next war with Russia, being so much exhausted. So we have to finish this war to make Russia lose and to recognize its defeat, because actually the only thing that we demand, that Russia get out from our territories, just get out from our territories, release our people, and recognize what was like that Russia came to its own signed agreement with Ukraine, that it signed after the collapse of the Soviet Union, and recognize it. So that's the only our demands.
Sorry, we lost Dr. Snigger there. If you're with me, can you hear me?
Yes. Where did you lose me?
I lost you where you continue to expound about the need for Ukraine to protect their interests, because Russia can't be trusted not to take on more territory or do something worse if they're talking about peace, right?
Yes. Actually, yeah, you're right. Russia cannot be trusted here. So, what is very important, that is Russia internationally recognizes its defeat and goes out of Ukraine, just gets out from our territories and releases our people, all our prisoners of wars and civilians, and also children, which are captured, kidnapped by Russia, and taken to Russian territory. That's what we want. And because it's important also for international community, because the big nuclear power cannot just change the world or the city or attack the neighbor country just because it has a nuclear power as the last argument. That's what Russia is constantly repeating, that they have this nuclear weapon and they can use it as the last argument. This is unacceptable for the world, because we all know that after already no country in the world can feel itself safe enough, because the international security system doesn't work. So Russian defeat will mean that international security system works, and that all small and medium countries in the world can feel themselves secured by international system and international law.
Okay, so finally, and I want a yes or no answer from you now. Are you saying, in other words, that this war will be resolved only on the battlefield, only at the front line?
Unless something happens in Moscow and they decide like that, okay, that's fine. We finish this war, we get out of Ukraine, because Russia, in that case, Russia doesn't lose anything. It just gets to its own territories. That's it. Okay. Unless this happens, yes.
Well, again, we're stuck between a rock and a hard place. We hope that this is resolved. We thank you for your time and your expertise and your opinion this morning, Dr. Olena Snigger, expert of global strategic studies in Ukraine, who joined us from Kyiv. Many thanks, Dyakuyu.
Thank you very much for the invitation. Goodbye.
Welcome back to the sophomore stretch of today's coverage of Russian invasion of Ukraine. Zambian President Hakainde Hichilema has called for peace to be restored between Russia and Ukraine. He made the call during his visit to China as the ongoing crisis continues to impact heavily on the African continent. Mr. Hichilema was one of 7 African leaders who visited Ukraine and Russia and presented a 10-point peace plan that calls for ending the conflict through negotiations and diplomatic means and de-escalating tension on both sides. During a meeting with Russian President Vladimir Putin in St. Petersburg, South Africa's President Cyril Ramaphosa, also a member of the delegation, says the Ukraine crisis has caused a price hike in energy and fuel, fertilizer and food in African nations and the rest of the world. The delegation presented a 10-point peace plan, including recognition of Russia and Ukraine's sovereignty and continued unhindered grain exports, to calls for ending the conflict through negotiations and diplomatic means and de-escalating tension on both sides. In February, China also called for a comprehensive ceasefire and negotiations to end the war in Ukraine and issued a 12-point peace plan to achieve that objective. Mr. Hichilema was also critical to those in the West who seem to routinely dismiss Africa's interests and sought to make clear that major global crises in the past and in the present have had a profound impact on the continent.
The other reasons that really are not common interest reasons, that somebody or a country would be negative about the African leader talking peace. China is making its own efforts. I decided to take a bit of time to answer this question so I can clear some of the misconceptions, some of the deliberate misunderstandings. I do really think that if you look at the Second World War, Africa was affected. Africans fought in it. Africans were conscripted in that war. And the scars of that war still linger on. We don't want war. We don't want conflict. What we want is cooperation, is partnership, is mutuality, common value. I repeat, we urge our colleagues, our brothers and sisters, to restore peace and order.
A former commander of the Wagner mercenary group has been arrested by Norwegian police on suspicion that he tried to illegally cross the border into Russia after seeking asylum in Norway earlier this year. Andrei Medvedev, who escaped Russia in January via its Arctic border with Norway, has described running as Russian guards firing shots at him. He has spoken about his time fighting in Ukraine as part of the Wagner group. Medvedev, in an interview in February, had apologized, saying he's sorry for his role in the Wagner group. Police said in a statement that a man in his 20s had been taken into custody for attempting to illegally cross the Russian border, but did not name him. An officer with the Finnmark local police also declined to give arrested man's identity. Now let's talk to Dr. Ambrose Igboke, Chairman, Guild of Public Affairs Analysts, Enugu State Chapter. Thank you for being with us and a very good morning to you.
Good morning, Olumide. It's good to be here once more.
It's good to have you. Could we begin with the fallouts of this war and possibly dichotomies that are emerging or re-emerging, and maybe double standards or not, if you'll be the judge for us at this instance? On the heels of Kim Jong-un's visit to North Korea, and even before that, a lot of criticism from South Korea and the West. But South Korea and Japan and the United States have been playing ring around the rosy. But as soon as North Korea expresses interest in deepening its relations with Russia, then they are public enemy number one once again. What's your view?
I have maintained in the past that the war in Ukraine is a merely proxy war between the United States of America and Russia. These two gladiators are the ones at war, not Ukraine. Ukraine is just a chessboard that the members are used for the chess game. And it's unfortunate. And they found a willing collaborator and the person of Zelensky, who is the president of Ukraine. He's just a willing tool being used to destabilize his own people. That is the judgment I will give to him. Because if he's a leader who knows the dynamics of what has been going on since the Cold War era, up till the fall of Berlin Wall and the fall of USSR in the 1991-1990, then he should be briefed enough to know that these are proxy wars. So what is happening now is that countries are taking sides, of course. Russia has its own allies. The West has rallied, America has rallied, France, rallied Canada, Britain, France, Germany. They are on one side and looking for more allies. And that is why when they went to G20 summit in India, they wanted to push the rest of the world to, make a deep statement and an emphatic statement condemning Russia. Others, you could see that the rest of the G20 people said, no, that is not what we came here to discuss. So from both sides, each one is trying to rally around. Russia is talking to China, is moving to India, talking to Belarus. All of a sudden, there is a renewed upsurge of diplomatic activities for Russia in African continent, trying to get more allies and trying to also sell its product, because Russia has, been blockaded in a lot of their sales activity in Europe. So they're looking for net earnings from their export, looking for new frontiers. It also becomes, this war is having a dangerous aspect of it as well. The global financial system has been unified of some sort, having, global transaction, ease of doing business, and also in terms of foreign reserves. What this is showing is that countries all over the world who have their foreign assets in the United States, in Britain, in Switzerland, and other countries, it's not safe. The United States and its allies are telling countries in the world that your foreign reserves and assets are not safe with us. Because if there are skirmishes that what is going on now, look at them freezing Russia's, even as of yesterday, threatening to freeze Russia's assets when they have overseas, and also taking out Russia away from SWIFT. So what we are now saying is that this war will cause more damages. The after effect of the war is that there will be global mistrust in the financial sector. But if you have the power to freeze my asset or seize or confiscate my asset because I have a problem with you, I think that is an implied stealing. And this, we must watch how we dance to this war tune, or how the actions we take, because they will have far more reaching global consequences than what we are seeing now. So as we see now, it is unfortunate. Ukraine is in the middle of these, proxy wars, and the big five, permanent members of the Security Council, are the ones causing all this trouble all over.
If it is more of a proxy war, as you say, then why is Ukraine falling for it? Are their interests in Ukraine so politicized that they can't tell the difference between the United States trying to further their own interests and trying to help another country that is being threatened by another country in its sovereignty? That is first case in point. And secondly, if it's a proxy war, the Russians haven't made it easy for the United States, have made it easier, I beg your pardon, have given them an excuse for that to happen. Because if you're going to invade the country gung-ho, if you're going to cross their borders and take their territory, then you're making it easy for the United States and other countries who have other interests, as you allege, to do exactly what they're doing.
The question that everybody wants to ask is that who appointed the United States of America to be the police of the world? Who appointed the United States of America to safeguard other sovereign territories? Who appointed the United States of America to determine when it is invasion or when it invades other countries and it calls it democratic restoration, like when he invaded Iraq, when he invaded Vietnam, when he invaded Panama, when he invaded some other countries, when he invaded Cuba in the 60s in the Cold Missile War. When America does it, it is the defense of democracy. When others, so all of them, the big five permanent members of the Security Council, are belligerent in terms of the actions they take. And America has always, positioned itself as the police of the world since the role it played in the end of the Second World War, it was instrumental to ending the war with the atomic bomb in Nagasaki and Hiroshima. And after that, America seized that opportunity and started dictating to the world what to do. And when they did that famous dollar oil swap deal with Saudi Arabia, where the oil prices are determined in dollars, America just took over. And since then, it has been dictating to the world who is right and who is wrong. So some countries in the world have rejected that role of America, telling them what to do. Some, as China, Russia is part of it too, dictating the pace. What would have happened was this: Zelensky is not playing the game well. Remember that this is not the first time other countries are invaded. For example, Britain invaded Gibraltar. What happened? There was some kind of invasion of America in Panama. There was the Cuban Missile Crisis, I think, of 1968, where America till today is occupying Guantanamo Bay in Cuba, and it was silently done. And so some other countries have invaded, and there was a way even though they even subsist there till today, but the whole country was not plunged into war. The Vietnam crisis too, we saw how that went. And so Zelensky allowing his country to be used as theater of war is what I don't understand really, because other countries have been invaded, but there was a way they found a solution. Even Afghanistan was invaded at a point, first by Russia, then later by United States. At the end of the day, the country was still giving back to the Taliban. So there are ways to go to this, not to sacrifice your people. What was the root cause of this crisis? It was that Ukraine said he wanted to join NATO. Now, I don't know whether Ukraine had to discuss with his neighbor, Russia, to see the reasons why. Because when Russia wanted to build a missile defense system in Cuba, which was the next door neighbor to the United States of America, America said no. And when Cuba insisted, America went into Cuba and bombed the hell out of the place and confiscated the place to today. So why didn't Ukraine also go to Russia to discuss? I want to join this partnership. Maybe discuss the terms and maybe have an agreement on what they want to do. But they didn't do that. And for us to pretend that every country is sovereign, the true sense of sovereignty is making a joke out of reality, because the countries that have nuclear weapons as deterrents always ride this rough shoulder with the rest that don't have nuclear weapons. That is why there's a race for nuclear armament and capabilities. So the Ukraine war is becoming a complex issue. It's becoming an economic war. It's becoming all sorts of war. Russia and America and its allies are testing the wits and might of each other and trying to see who will bend first. And unfortunately, people are dying, both from the Russian side and from the Ukraine side. And guess what? American citizens are tucked thousands of miles away, and it's not even affecting them in any way.
And these same American citizens, some of whom are beginning to cry out against the amount of aid going out to Ukraine. We had a Senator, Rand Paul, if you're aware, a Republican senator, making a presentation at the U.S. Congress claiming that they don't have the money to send to Ukraine, that they have to borrow the money to send to Ukraine, and being harshly critical of President Joe Biden's motives in this regard, knowing that there are issues domestically in the United States that are yet to be addressed. But this Ukraine war aid for the Biden administration is front and center. As the U.S. elections come up next year, do you see the Republican Party having more of an influence? And possibly, what is your prediction or your thoughts about the outcome and how the U.S. aid continues to affect protracting and keeping the war going in Ukraine?
The budget that is being made for war in the United States, especially for foreign wars outside the shores of the United States, is actually targeted at enriching some few businessmen and not the American citizen or the American country. The United States of America perhaps has one of the oldest public infrastructure in the world. I mean, most of their public infrastructure are hundreds of years, and so they don't have the kind of modern infrastructure maybe Dubai or UAE has, or what China has, and so many other countries that are coming up with unique this thing. So the United States is reeking with creaking infrastructure, very old public assets, which they needed to work on. But because the target of the elites in the United States, there is a state capture for the United States over the years. We check the history. A few people have captured the United States and are using it for their personal businesses, and that is what has been happening. The war in Ukraine, of course, there will be sale of arms. There are manufacturers for arms. There are manufacturers for warplanes. The logistics are going to be there. Who will provide the logistics for food, the medicine? Who are the big farmers that we gain from it? After the war, the destruction of public infrastructure, already there will be businessmen who will say, okay, we want to go construct the facilities in Ukraine. So when the United States gives us aid, what we call aid, the aid is paid as contract sum to the contractors. And who are these contractors? These are the businessmen that will make money from it to the expense of the American citizen. Therefore, when the elections come, sometimes I feel that United States citizens don't even know what they want in their political leaders. There's a lack of consistency in their choices. So tomorrow they cry that they want Republicans. Republicans will say, oh, they want to maintain American interests. They will push another narrative that, oh, no, global interest is a priority. And then they will push out the Republicans. The next time they'll bring Democrats. And, they keep complaining. So at a point, just keep complaining. What does the average American citizen really want? So as they go into the election, it's time to redefine their future trajectory to actually know if they want to continue to pretend to be police of the world and spend humongous billions of dollars, frittering it away at the expense of their citizens, or they really want to develop the United States of America for the future generation and move it forward and spend more money at home than spend more money in foreign wars. Remember that when Donald Trump was president, he closed down a lot of war. And he was saying that he was going to bring back a lot of troops. Afghanistan and some other places. Joe Biden also closed down Afghanistan, and they were in a hurry to leave the country after leaving behind billions of dollars worth of assets and war assets and equipment. To whose detriment? To the detriment of American citizens. So it is not fair on the American citizen, on the taxpayers in the United States, that these monies will be used to prosecute foreign wars to the financial advantage of the few and to the disadvantage of most of American citizens.
And we hope that in the very, very near term that peace will begin to be seen in this situation. Thank you, Dr. Ambrose Ogbuke, for your contribution this morning, the Chairman Guild of Public Affairs Analysts who joined us of the Enugu State Chapter, who joined us from Enugu. Thank you for being with us today.
Thank you, Lumide, as usual, for having me.
Thank you for staying with us, and welcome to the final stretch of today's coverage of Russian invasion of Ukraine as we turn our attention to the aviation industry and find that Russia wants to increase control over citizens' purchase of airline tickets. To help us make sense of that is Ini John Mekwa, Channels Television business correspondent. Ini, good morning.
Good morning.
So the aviation industry now is
getting in Russia.
Yeah, in Russia. So why are they doing this?
Well, I guess I believe you've been talking about how Ukraine has also been retaliating, a lot of blasts going on in Crimea, and some targets, Russian targets, have also been hit. So it looks like Russia is tightening its security news around people who would come and go out from its country. So at first, of course, when you're traveling, you fill in to buy your tickets, your passport number, your date of birth, and things like that, date of travel, gender, citizenship, phone number, email. Now, it seems that they want to start by asking some other more personal details. If you want to get a ticket to travel in and out of Russia, you would indicate your method of payment. Remember, they have that crypto that they're trying to, there's digital ruble, there's also crypto that they are working on to be able to maybe run away from some of the sanctions. But when it comes to crypto, they don't want it to be used domestically. So it seems that drilling down on things like that, that's why you will now indicate your method of payment, account number, your card number, you know, some information that individuals may feel it's too personal to be put out there in public. But I guess Russia is just looking out for itself. And don't forget that a lot of Russians, young men especially, have left the country because they don't want to be recruited into the war. So this might be another discouraging factor, or factor to stop people who want to run away and not get recruited for the war.
It might be interesting to note that Russian airspace is relatively safe. We don't hear of anything aside from the front lines of the borders with Luhansk and possibly the Crimean area. Russia proper itself, the airspace, there's not been any news.
Because, you know, Russia is a very big country, and they have, over the years, developed their airspace, because most of the travel within Russia is done via air. And that's why one of the areas that the West hit when they started the sanction was the airspace. Remember the aircraft and pulling out of spare parts and all of that. Their airspace is very active and very developed. You know, so, I mean, it doesn't come as a surprise that there's safety there, because they know that it's something that they use very often.
Speaking of safety, I was beleaguered to find that it's going on as far as the shipping corridors for Ukraine's export of grain is concerned. Russia hasn't really attacked them properly to cause them to stop.
Olumide, please don't be wicked. How can you say they've not attacked them? They've not attacked them properly.
Yes, properly. Because if they had, they wouldn't be talking about any shipping at all.
No, but this is alternative, which they had to turn to after their major routes.
It's still the Black Sea, right?
Through Danube and some other country, Romania, those who also share the Black Sea.
Or the Mediterranean Sea.
Maybe we should even talk about
the Atlantic, it's the Black Sea.
So that Russia will not turn its attention.
Okay, so they don't remember.
Yeah,
say,
so
okay, let's go.
We need this grain. I mean, so far I think they've shipped about 130,000 tons. They started in August and all of that. But we also know that Russia has attacked Ukraine's grain stores. You know, so maybe we shouldn't even talk about it, so Russia will not turn its way there.
We have to talk about it now. We have to talk about it because it's gaining traction.
Yeah, but the world needs it. The world needs it. And guess what Russia is doing to make it even worse? Well, good for the world, but bad for Ukraine, is that Russia has been giving out cheap grain. So they're not just selling cheap oil, although oil is no longer cheap because of their cuts in production. But they're giving out cheap grain now to the world. So it's dropping, the price of wheat, of corn dropping, because Russia is ensuring that it is feeding its grain, its wheat, its corn to the world.
This is an indirect attack of Ukrainian grain?
Ukrainian
because if the price falls, the revenue won't be as much.
Yeah, so if the West is saying that they're going to put price cap on oil for Russia, stop companies from working with them and doing business with them so that their revenue, that's Russia's revenue, will drop and they won't be able to fund, you know, the war, then Russia is also looking at how to do the same to Ukraine, because if Ukraine cannot get its grain out, and now Poland, they still have the huge fight they have to deal with its close neighbor, Poland, you know, and Poland is also supposed to serve as a way through for them to get their grain outside into the world. So if they cannot do that, then obviously it's an attack on their revenue. And how long would they be living on aid?
One wonders how sustainable that will be, if that's sustainable.
Exactly.
And maybe that's why they're attacking the silos and the grain infrastructure.
Yeah, well, good strategy for the war, but bad one for the world.
Indeed. Thanks, Ini.
Thank you for having me.
Ini John Mekwe, Channels Television business correspondent. And meeting with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky was like speaking with a friend. This is the summation of one of the Poles who met with him in the Polish city of Lublin. President Zelensky announced on social media he'd made a stop in the area on the way back to Ukraine from a visit to the United States and Canada to thank the Poles who'd helped Ukrainians. Damian Duda, an academic and combat medic who has volunteered in Ukraine since 2014, says recent political tension between Warsaw and Kiev had no bearing on his work, as he is bent on saving human lives on the front lines. Poland decided last week to extend a ban on Ukrainian grain imports. shaking Kiev's relationship with a neighbor seen as one of its closest allies since Russia invaded Ukraine in February last year. Poland's Prime Minister told Mr. Zelensky last week not to insult the Polish, maintaining harsh rhetoric towards Kiev ahead of elections on October the 15th. The ruling Law and Justice Party has been criticized by the far right for what it says is the government's subservient attitude to Ukraine. And finally, on the program, you're watching a memorial complex to Russians who died fighting in Ukraine during the special military operation, as they term it, opened near St. Petersburg. The monument was opened on the territory of the military base where Russian soldiers laid a wreath at the memorial. The governor of the Leningrad region, Alexander Drozdenko, was also present at the meeting. Reports say Russian military casualties are approaching 300,000. Special honor always reserved for those serving in the rank and file of the military, both in service and afterwards. And that's where we leave it for today's coverage of Russian invasion of Ukraine. Thank you for watching. I'm Olumide Macaulay. Do have a great day.